Krishna. Welcome, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
So we all remember that this one, you don't know, that'll come. So we all remember that Prabhupada visited to Nairobi, right? And Brahmanand, was it Brahmanand? Yeah, Brahmanand Maharaj was there, and his plan was to bring him back to India to have the GBC secretary, to become the GBC secretary role someone needs to play. And it is, we all read about this great incident of Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj's sannyas initiation. And also we learned how African devotees knew, they don't know how to cook, what, and the clothes, people also, they steal the clothes, even sannyasi clothes also they steal, they don't know what the difference. So finally Prabhupada saw that everything is such bad way and they are cooking. So Prabhupada personally cooked and trained them now, right? So we are, Prabhupada is in Nairobi at this time. Let's see what happens. Brahmanand Swami found that Prabhupada was mostly absorbed in his Bombay project. The only reason I have come, Srila Prabhupada told Brahmanand Swami, is to get you for this. Once he asked Brahmanand Swami, which is the most important city in India? Calcutta, Brahmanand replied. Calcutta? Prabhupada looked at him oddly. Don't you know Bombay is the number one? How Prabhupada is making them. Delhi is number 2 and Calcutta is number 3. Prabhupada encouraged Brahmanand Swami to return with him and take charge of the Bombay project. This Bombay project, he said, would be unique within ISKCON, incorporating the religious with the cultural in a gorgeous temple, international hotel, theater, and diorama exhibition. Seeing Prabhupada's strong desire, Brahmanand Maharaj agreed to somehow relinquish his Nairobi responsibilities to others and help in Bombay. In yet another way, Prabhupada's visit to Nairobi connected with his Bombay project. When Brahmanand Swami and Chavana showed Prabhupada the Nairobi Hilton, a modern building with twin round towers, Prabhupada liked that design and wanted to give it to his architect for the Bombay Hotel and Temple. Prabhupada, Brahmanand Swami, Bhagavata, and an African devotee were talking in Nairobi's public gardens. On being introduced to Prabhupada, the African had inquired, "If I want to, can I get married?" "Oh yes," said Prabhupada. But Prabhupada, the boy continued, "If you want to get married in our community, the boy has to pay money to the father of the bride." Oh, the boy has to pay the money, eh? That's interesting culture. This was exactly opposite the Vedic system. Prabhupada replied, wherein the father of the bride presents a dowry to his son-in-law. Hearing this, Prabhupada's new disciple looked worried. He asked, "Then will you give me money when I want to get my wife? Because I'm not working now, I'm just working for you. Then I want to want to get married, get my wife, will you give me money?" Prabhupada shook his head. "You don't worry about all this," he said. "Whether you will get a wife or whether you will get money or is this or that. Later on, when it is the time for you to get married, I'll bring an American girl and you will get married." That's the funny, I hope you all like the humors here. Disciple brings interesting thing. So Prabhupada's mind is Bombay project. We all know it's in difficult. Somebody leadership is needed to develop that. He has unique vision for this, and he has been trying to convince, in one sense, inspire Brahmanand Swami Maharaj. So finally, say, "Yeah, I will go. I'll hand over this responsibility to someone, and I will go." Prabhupada liked the Nairobi hotel. Hilton Hotel, actually, the architecture. He wanted to take the design for the Bombay Hotel and Temple. So one day they were sitting, Brahmanand Swami, Prabhupada, and Bhagavata, and an African devotee. He's addressing his concern. He said that What happens if I give my time and if I want to get married in future? The person, you can get married, no problem. Then his point is, well, if I get married in our culture, if I get a bride, I have to pay the money to the bride's father. So Prabhupada say, where this culture is coming, it's totally opposite to the Indian Vedic culture. In Vedic culture, the bride's father gives the money to the groom. So now his point is, okay, if I get married, will you give? Because I'll be serving here. I will not have any money. Will you give me money? So Prabhupada said, okay, don't worry, those things we will think. First, let there be a wife. First you have to wife. You find a girl to get married. He said, don't worry, when you want to get married, I'll get an American girl and get you married. Prabhupada is kind of funny. Goran,
Where,
this one. Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
Wherever Prabhupada turned in his fledgling Nairobi temple, they found neophyte disciples and discrepancies. Walking into the brahmachari ashram, he found books, boards, and paint cans scattered about the room. When he said things should be kept more neatly and orderly, the temple commander, Hari Kripa, replied, Prabhupada, I try to tell them, but these boys don't listen to me. Prabhupada bent down and picked up some piece of wood. If they don't do it, he said, then you should do it. Put these over here. And Prabhupada began engaging all the men present. Within 5 minutes, the room was neat. The World Hare Krishna Movement Festival at Nairobi City Stadium was a combination success and failure. Although Brahmanand Swami managed to see many highly posted government officials and diplomats, many of whom who had promised to attend the festival, none of them actually appeared, except for Mr. Y. Kamora, Kenya's Director of Education. But an audience of several hundred attended Kirtan, heard Prabhupada's speech, and took prasadam. Although the devotees had invited the leading Kenyan citizens to enhance the glorification of Krishna, their honored guest, Mr. Komora, used the opportunity to speak in the praise of Kenya. Nevertheless, he spoke highly of Prabhupada and Krishna conscious movement. Regarding Bhagavad Gita, he said, your learned founder has made this great book available in the English tradition with an erudite commentary. Srila Prabhupada also attended other engagements in and around Nairobi. He told his Nairobi disciples that in preaching to the Africans, they should stretch the chanting of Hare Krishna by holding public kirtans. Lord Chaitanya, he said, spoke philosophy only with the learned scholars like Sanatan and Rupa Goswami, never with ordinary men. Just chant Hare Krishna, he said, this should be appreciated. Srila Prabhupada installed the deities of Radha Krishna and named the Nairobi temple Kirata Suti, a place for purifying the aborigines. One day, shortly after the deity installation, however, Prabhupada walked into the temple room and was shocked to find the deities out of their proper place in the center of the altar. Krishna was standing to the far left beside the bottom step, leading up to its altar, and Radharani stood to the far right. Who has done this? Prabhupada called out loudly. Bhagavat Prabhu came running into the temple room. He also was astonished. Who has put Radha and Krishna 10 miles apart? Prabhupada demanded, don't you know these things? How many times do I have to teach you? Bhuta Bhavan suddenly appeared, admitting that he was the culprit. Why are they so far apart? Prabhupada asked. I don't know, Srila Prabhupada, said Bhuta Bhavan. I guess I just forgot. I was being rushed to go to the festival. So Prabhupada demanded, does that mean they should be put out in the street? Bhuta Bhavan froze, unable to reply. Prabhupada relented. Take them and put them together, he said. They should not be moved more than 3 inches apart. Now do it nicely.
I hope it's not same group around from right? You at the class.
No, he's not. So wherever Prabhupada would go in the Nairobi temple, he found that there would be like neophyte disciples and they'd be making mistakes. When he walked into Brahmachari ashram, he found that it was all a mess. And the temple commander, Hari Kripa Prabhu, told Prabhupada that he would try to tell the boys, but they wouldn't listen. So Prabhupada said, then if they don't listen, then you should do it. And in 5 minutes, Prabhupada had the whole room clean with the men present there. And then they had a Hare Krishna movement festival in the city stadium, which was a combination of success and failure. It was failure part was that Brahmananda Swami Maharaj had managed to see many highly posted government officials, but who had promised to attend the festival, but none of them actually appeared, except for the director of education, Mr. Y. Komora. But an audience of several hundred attended the kirtan and heard Prabhupada's speech and took prasadam. The So Mr. Komora there then spoke also, and he spoke in praise of Kenya, but he also spoke highly of Srila Prabhupada's books, the Krishna conscious movement. And he said that everyone should take advantage of reading the Bhagavad Gita, because take advantage of reading the Bhagavad Gita because it's such a great book. And now it's available for them to read. And Prabhupada also had told the devotees that they should always keep Harinam Sankirtan going on, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would only teach philosophy to learned scholars, so not to ordinary men. So these men should just keep on listening to Hare Krishna Mahamantra and keep on chanting it. And Prabhupada installed the Radha Krishna deities at the Nairobi temple, which was named Kirata Sudhi. One day he found that Radha and Krishna were separate, very farly separate, which was not proper, and Prabhupada became angry at this. And later he found out that Putabhav and Prabhu had separated them, and Putabhavan's first excuse was that saying that he was being rushed for the festival, so he forgot. Prabhupada said that is never an excuse, because the Radha and Krishna deity should always be together. This is first, and then coming to festivals later. So he told them to put them together, and they should never be more than 3 inches apart.
It's interesting. Prabhupada installed Radha Krishna deities in Nairobi. Prabhupada well understand. That's why he named as Kirata Suddhi. Kirata means category. People is called Kiratas. You all know, right? Kiratas considered not very highly cultured. So that's why he named it. And anyone understand why Prabhupada, I'll ask to all of you, why Prabhupada suggested that we should have Sankirtan in Nairobi more? Not too many philosophies.
It will help in expanding the movement in Nairobi.
No. When people feel it's not everyone's ability to understand the philosophy. Considering the mindset, the ability of the people, intelligence, he said no, just Harinam Sankirtan Prasadam. So they will not have ability to looks like notice that they don't have ability to understand attraction. In India also many times we do the same thing. Many places when people are so disturbing, crowd, sometimes people come, they just talk. So many times it is done as a Sankirtan Prasadam only, nothing much for them. So, okay, that's okay. So I can prove, you can read.
After a week, Prabhupada left Nairobi and returned to Bombay. He had gone there to get Brahmananda Swami, and he had accomplished his mission. Unless he agreed to take charge, Prabhupada said, I could not go ahead and pay so much money. Now it is decided. He felt new hope. Prabhupada envisioned his Bombay project as extraordinary within ISKCON and even among all the temples of India. Many of the details of the project already existed within his mind, but he needed competent disciples to carry them out. He was still the lone leader of ISKCON, forging ahead to bring into reality new phases of the Krishna consciousness movement. His disciples were behind him, but it was always he who led. Even when he wanted his disciples as leaders of various ISKCON projects, they sometimes could not handle the responsibility. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada had gone to Nairobi in the mood of the Bengali aphorism he sometimes quoted, if you want to accomplish the thing, do it by your own hand. So by his own hand, he had brought Brahmananda Swami from Nairobi to Bombay. and simultaneously he had benefited the devotees and the general populace of Nairobi. Bombay, February 8, 1972. Prabhupada met with Mr. N and reiterated that he wanted to move on to the land as soon as Mr. N received the second 50,000 rupees. Mr. N stood firm on their agreement, and Prabhupada put the matter into the hands of his lawyer, Mr. T, for legal processing. Although Prabhupada was making all the managerial decisions, he wanted the GBC secretaries to take on the responsibility for these practical affairs. He thought it better to use his energy in writing and translating books. If you GBC do everything nicely, he told Secretary Shyamasundara, then my brain will not be taxed and I can utilize my time completely to produce further books. I can give you Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, Mahabharata, Ramayana, so many. There are so many devotional works in our line by the Goswamis. This administrative work is taking too much time. I could be discussing philosophy. My brain is being taxed day and night. Because of this, I'm neglecting my real work. Aside from directing, managing the Indian projects, Prabhupada was answering as many as a dozen letters daily from devotees around the world. Why do they keep writing, asking so many questions? He asked his secretary. The devotees prefer to ask you personally, Shyam Sundar said, because the GBC men don't always know the right answer. They know everything by now, Prabhupada replied. I have given you everything. If they don't know the answer, they can find it in my books. Now I am an old man. Let me settle down to philosophy. All day reading letters, doing business, all night signing letters. This is not right. I want to be free from these things. The GBC can do everything now. But it wasn't possible. As soon as Prabhupada would sense that one of his devotees was being cheated, he would immediately become actively involved, and his disciples continued to write him regarding important business and managerial decisions. Nor would he discourage them. His desire for retirement and exclusive literary work remained, but it seemed to be only a wishful thought, a dream. If ISKCON were to develop, then there seemed little scope for his retirement. After the meeting with Mr. N, Prabhupada prepared to leave for South India for a 5-day Pandal program in Madras. Also on his itinerary were visits to Calcutta, Mayapur and Vrindavan. As he prepared to leave Bombay, he felt happy that ISKCON would soon occupy the new Juhu property, and he frequently spoke of his plans. So here, Prabhupada left Nairobi and he came back to Bombay. So when his main purpose was to get Brahmanand Swami and make him in charge of the Juhu project. So he was able to do that. And then he had a very big vision for ISKCON Bombay, the Juhu project. He wanted it to be like one of the big temples in not only ISKCON but also in India. He wanted his disciples to lead those projects, but they were not able to handle the responsibility, and he would have to do it themselves. And Prabhupada often quotes that if you want to accomplish something, you have to do it by yourself. So by his own self, he brought Brahmanand Swami from Nairobi to Bombay and made him in charge of the Juhu project. Then in Bombay, he meets with Mr. N and reiterated that once they pay the second 50,000 rupees, that they could move into the land. And Mr. N stood firm on their agreement. I believe Mr. N wanted 2,000 rupees, 200,000 rupees, I think. And Prabhupada put the matter into the hands of Mr. D, who is the lawyer. Prabhupada was making all the managerial decisions, but he wanted the GBC secretaries to take on more responsibilities. And he says to Shyam Sundar that the brain is getting taxed by doing all of these managerial things, and he's not able to do the main translation work. And he says that if the GBC can do everything nicely, he can focus on translating the Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, Mahabharata, and Ramayana. And it is affecting the real work. Prabhupada, in addition to managing, he was also replying to many, reading and replying to almost a dozen letters daily. And he asked Sham Sundar, like, why are they asking me so many questions? Sham Sundar says that the GBC men don't have the right answer and they want to ask you personally. And Prabhupada responds back saying that they have everything. They know they know everything by now. If they're not able to know, they don't know the answer, they should be looking in the books that Prabhupada wrote. He says that he wants to be free from things and give all the responsibility to GPC and focus on philosophy and translation. But it was not possible because Prabhupada, whenever he would see that one devotee was being cheated, he would become actively involved and so forth, that the disciple would continue to write him regarding all the important decisions, and Prabhupada would not discourage them. So this way, even though he wanted to focus on literary work, it always was like an afterthought. It was like it was a distant thing. So Prabhupada, after meeting with N, he wanted to leave for South India and he wanted to have a 5-day Pandal program in Madras. And he also wanted to visit Calcutta, Mayapur and Vrindavan.
Okay. AJ, welcome back. You're on vacation for 2 days. You can read now.
It's my wife's birthday, so I had
Oh,
to do that.
today or yesterday?
What's that? It was yesterday. Yeah.
I won't blame it.
Yeah, I would have left this body sooner than I was ready if I was here last night. So let's see.
Got it.
ISKCON would erect a fabulous temple and form a cooperative housing society of devotees of Krishna, the first ISKCON city. Respectable men would purchase flats in ISKCON's high-rise condominium. Devotees would have to become expert to develop and operate such a complex, and as they became successful, they would introduce the same pattern in other cities. Businessmen and professional workers could live as devotees in a co-op society, housing their families and sending their children to an ISKCON school. Prabhupada repeatedly talked of constructing an international hotel, somewhat like a Holiday Inn, suitable for foreigners and traveling businessmen, yet reserving a floor for ISKCON life members who would receive free accommodations. The restaurants would be managed by expert Brahmana cooks who would prepare dozens of different preparations of sumptuous prasadam. The deities Radha Rasa Vihari would receive 52 offerings daily, and the prasadam would be distributed to residents and guests. To start things in the right direction, Prabhupada ordered the devotees to immediately arrange for a 10-day public festival on the new land. First, Brahmananda Swami should pay the agreed balance and move on to the land along with all the devotees and the deities, Radha and Rasa Vihari. Then they should prepare a big pandal tent and arrange a full program as they had previously in Bombay, in Calcutta, and in Delhi. Prabhupada wanted everything ready for his return in 2 weeks. Although, as Prabhupada would sometimes mention, in South India, the original Vedic culture was most intact, he had not been there in several years. Most of the great acharyas, Sankara, Ramanuja, and Madhva, had come from South India, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, during his own touring, had found South India especially favorable. Just after the Hare Krishna Pandal Festival in Delhi, on the eve of Prabhupada's first tour of Vrindavan with his disciples back in November 1971, Achyutananda Swami, Brahmananda Swami, and Giriraja had volunteered to go to Madras and to arrange a preaching program for Srila Prabhupada. When Achyutananda Swami had informed Prabhupada of the plan, Prabhupada had asked, "Oh, you are not going to Vrindavan with us?" "ISKCON is Vrindavan," Achyutananda had replied. "Yes," Prabhupada had said, "my Guru Maharaj used to think like that." "But which do you want us to do?" Giriraja had asked. What is the better service?" "I want to put on a pandal in Madras," Prabhupada had replied. "That would be more pleasing." So initially it talks about how Prabhupada had these ideas to open essentially like an ISKCON city, right? Where there would be high-rise condominiums where, the devotees could live and work with their families, and the children would go to ISKCON schools. And I think you need to go down a little bit there. 2 more. There you go. So he wanted to build a big temple and a housing society, where all the devotees could live. And the other idea he had was to create like a Krishna Holiday Inn, right? Like a hotel that was suitable for anybody that wanted to come through, but ISKCON members could live there, at no cost. And every day they would have a big 52 52 offerings of every type of prasadam, it sounds like, you can think of for the deities, and then be fed to the guests and the residents. And now they had this land, Prabhupada said, to get things started right, let's have a 10-day festival on this land. And he instructed Brahmananda and the rest of the devotees to move onto the land and set up a big tent and get started for the program, like they had in the other cities. And I like that everything for this need to be ready in 2 weeks. Like nowadays, like if somebody told you, hey, I want you to put on this massive 10-day festival, you'd start planning like 2 years out. And Prabhupada's like, 2 weeks, have it ready in 2 weeks. When I get back, let's do this thing. But so then, while they were working on that, Prabhupada, he wanted to go to South India. He hadn't been there in some time. And it talks about how, a lot of the great acharyas and had come from South India, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also was found it to be a good place as well. So after the Delhi festival, a couple of the disciples were going to go down to Madras, which I assume is in South India. We're going to go down to South India and set up a preaching program for Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's like, oh, why are you not coming to Vrindavan with us instead? Like, you should come with us. And Achyutananda goes, no, ISKCON is Vrindavan. And then that's when Prabhupada said, no, you know what? Let's put on a festival there in Madras. That's a good idea. Let's do that. So.
Thank you. That Juhu temple still has that large, big feast, famous feast, though I never had it. I heard a lot. There's almost more than 50 preparations or something like that. And they serve also the members of the society, life members still. Okay. Nipa?
Hare Krishna. Madras, Feb 11, 1972. Prabhupada, accompanied by 20 disciples, arrived in Madras and immediately took part in a parade through the streets. The parade, led by decorated elephant and a marching band, followed by the devotees' kirtana, featured Prabhupada riding in an old flower-covered American limousine. Prabhupada stayed as the guest of Mr. Balu, a Madrasi businessman. For 3 nights in the large hall packed with 5,000 people, Prabhupada lectured in English. One evening, he told a story from the Chaitanya Charitamrita of an illiterate South Indian Brahmana whom Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recognized for his staunch devotion to his spiritual master and to the Bhagavad Gita. The next morning and each subsequent morning, the Hindu, one of the Madras's 2 leading newspapers, printed a full summary of Prabhupada's lecture. The other principal newspaper gave a more general account of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami's arrival and the parade with his Western followers. The last 3-day program was followed by a more select gathering sponsored by Mr. K. Veera Swami, the Chief Justice of Madras. Attending the function were judges, lawyers, and other citizens of the city. Several thousand people gathered beneath the open pavilion as Prabhupada spoke about Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami of Vrindavana, who had given up their important government positions to join the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Indirectly, Prabhupada was requesting all the attending leaders of the Madras to join the Krishna consciousness movement. Prabhupada was aware that this audience, although respectful, was steeped in impersonalism, deep-seated conviction that impersonal Brahman was supreme and that all Hindu gods were equal manifestations of the One. And Prabhupada ended his talk by imploring his audience to accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just repeat, he said, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His appeal was so urgent and humble that some members of the audience actually repeated aloud, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Hindu's editor and publisher, Mr. Kasturi, was in attendance, and he printed a detailed summary of Prabhupada's speech in the next day's paper. So in Madras, Prabhupada arrived on Feb 11, 1972, accompanied by 20 of his disciples, and he took part in a parade through the streets. The parade was decorated by elephant and marching band, followed by Kirtana devotees, featured Prabhupada riding in an old flower-covered American limousine. Prabhupada stayed as the guest of Mr. Balu in his house Mr. Balu is a Madrasi businessman. For 3 nights in a large hall packed with 5,000 people, Prabhupada used to lecture in English. And one evening, Prabhupada narrated the story from Chaitanya Charita Amrit of an illiterate South Indian Brahmana, and whom Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had recognized for his staunch devotion for the spiritual master and to the Bhagavad Gita. And the very next morning and each subsequent morning, the Hindu, one of the Madras's two news leading papers, printed about Prabhupada's lecture. And there was another principal newspaper gave a general account of A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami's arrival and about the parade with his Western followers. This was like a large 3-day program, was followed by a more select gathering, which was sponsored by Mr. K. Veera Swami, who is the Chief Justice of Madras. There were many judges, lawyers, and other citizens who attended the function, and several thousand people gathered in the open pavilion as Prabhupada spoke about Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami of Vrindavana, who had given up their important positions in the government to join the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu movement. Indirectly, Prabhupada was requesting every leaders of Madras to join the Krishna conscious movement. Prabhupada got aware of his audience. They were respectful and steeped in impersonalism. Had a deep-seated conviction about impersonal brahmanas and Hindu gods, and they thought Hindu gods were equal manifestations of the one. And Prabhupada ended his talk by imploring his audience to accept as Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead, and he asked the audience to repeat after him that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, and audience repeated after him. And the Hindu's editor and publisher, Mr. Kasturi, was there, and he printed a detailed summary of Prabhupada's speech in the next day paper.
Yeah, Tamil Nadu. I don't know if anyone grew up in Tamil Nadu. No, right? Oh, we have Vijayanand Prabhu. I'm glad I didn't comment anything. Vijayanand Prabhu, you want to say something?
Yeah, Prabhu.
Let me comment that, then you can correct. Tamil is a place of spiritual, both impersonal, means Khichdi philosophy also there, and also prominent Vaishnava Sampradaya is the seat of one of the most important Sampradayas, Sri Sampradayas there. Madras people are generally very strong in their beliefs and everything, right? It's very hard to change. And not only that, they're very hard to accept other languages also, very, very strong. I want to hear from Vijayanand Prabhu. You have to make next month 10 devotees, Tamil devotees. Now tell something. Vijayanand Prabhu, speak something. It might be correct.
Yeah, Prabhu. But I will say, like Chennai, I will say it's a mix of everything. Like I've seen Vivekananda House as well as Parthasarathi Temple are both closely situated. Like that, this end and that end are like everything is given equal importance. That's what I can say.
But they're very much attached to their own culture, right? They won't be very easily accept that change. No? Tamil? Anyway, Gaurang is saying that the Tamil language is introduced by Agastya Muni. Created, yeah, same thing. Tamil language. You're saying something, Vijayanand Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Like even the ISKCON temple itself, like comparing to other cities in South India, they started lately in ISKCON temple in Chennai. So basically, yeah, like we have a lot of, importance will be given more to the demigods, I can say, and right. That's what I can say.
I don't know how the Murugan is very famous in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, because Lord Muruga is considered as the god of Tamil people, actually.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
We are changing to Krishna now. Even the Ranganath temple is there. Personally, Ranganath temple is there. That's the most still Murugan. Murugan, you know, AJ for you, Murugan means is the son of Lord Shiva. Kartikeya you're talking about, right? Murugan means Kartikeya, right?
Yeah, yes, Prabhu, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yes.
And Kartikeya is a Kshatriya for demigods. He's the commander, I think, the commander, right? He's
Right.
the commander for the demigods. So somehow they have a lot of maybe some history would be there. I was amazed to see. And sorry to divert because you're there. I thought let me take advantage of it. And now because you opened your mouth, you please read.
In addition to the usual news coverage, Srila Prabhupada held a press conference at a Madras hotel. Already happy with the press coverage, he appealed further to the room full of reporters. Giriraja. Prabhupada was not speaking to them as if they were newspaper reporters. Usually a newspaper reporter has a stereotyped idea of who he is, and you are giving an interview. So you have your stereotyped idea of who you are. And you answer his questions thinking of how it will be published. But I could see that Prabhupada was speaking to these reporters as spirit souls, as individual persons who are meant to be devotees of Krishna. Even though they were addressing him as newspaper reporters, he was answering them in a completely different way. He was encouraging them and saying, "This reporting that you have done is very nice. Krishna will bless you. Please help spread this movement." They were asking questions, thinking of his answers in terms of something to publish in the newspapers. But Prabhupada took it that they were spirit souls reaching out toward Krishna consciousness, and he answered in that way. Within a few days of Prabhupada's arrival, the whole city was feeling the presence of the Hare Krishna movement. Prabhupada scarcely slept, using the early morning hours for translating, even after his late night speaking engagements. He would go from place to place all day with great vitality, outdoing his young followers. Prabhupada's host, Mr. Balu, although a prominent businessman, was also well known as a religious man. He received Prabhupada warmly and respectfully, according to proper Vedic etiquette. Prabhupada noted that Mr. Balu had his own temple with beautiful Radha Krishna deities and a large Tulsi plant. When the devotees accompanying Srila Prabhupada asked Mr. Balu why the deities were often dressed in black, he replied that they were so effulgent that if he did not dress them in black, he would not be able to look on them. He did not make prostrated obeisances to his deity because he and his wife are Krishna's father and mother, he said, and how can the father pay obeisances to his son? Prabhupada and his host related to each other graciously, but one night Mr. Balu and his wife came to Srila Prabhupada asking him to please speak about the Rasa Leela of Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada replied that the Rasa Leela, being the most exalted spiritual topic, was meant only for the liberated souls. Only one completely free of material desires, Prabhupada explained, was fit to hear the Rasa Leela. Okay, I think this star is for Rasa Leela. The most exalted and intimate of Lord Krishna's pastimes is dancing with the cohorts girls in Vrindavana. No, Swamiji, Mr. Balu insisted. My wife and I are very keen. You must recite Rasa Leela. Again, Prabhupada described the exalted portion of the Rasa dance, repeating the only when one is completely free of all material attachments to wife, family, home, and money, could he become fit to hear the Krishna's Rasa dance. Mr. Balu then folded his hands and politely repeated, Swamiji, my wife and I plead with you, please recite Rasa Leela. Then Prabhupada replied, well, you may be fit to hear Rasa Leela, but I do not feel that I am qualified to speak it. Kindly ask someone else. So this explains about how Prabhupada is giving the addressing the house full of reporters in the Madras hotel, where Giriraj Swami is mentioning, like Prabhupada was not considering the newspaper reporters as if they are like a reporter and who come up with some questions and just giving an interview. But he thought that they should he treated them as if they are spiritual souls and they are there to be a devotees of Krishna. So having this in his mind, he was answering them in a completely different way, and he was encouraging them and was mentioning that I was praising them by saying that the reporting that they are doing was very nice, and Krishna will bless them. And they asked the reporters to help the help spread this movement. And so when the reporter asked some questions to him, he replied in such a way that they thinking that they were like spirit souls reaching out towards Krishna consciousness, and he provided the answers in that way. And like during those all the time in the Madras, like he was feeling the city was feeling the presence of the Hare Krishna movement, and Prabhupada like scarcely slept, and he spent early morning for the translating and late night for the speaking engagements, and he was moving from place to place along with his young followers. And like there was one host, there was one person, one businessman hosted Prabhupada. He was also a religious man. He received Prabhupada warmly and according to proper Vedic etiquette. And Prabhupada noted that Mr. Balu had his own temple of Radha Krishna, beautiful Radha Krishna deities, and a large tulsi plant. And the devotees accompanying Prabhupada questioned Mr. Balu like why he has dressed the deities in black. And for that, Mr. Balu replied that like if he do not dress them in black, he would not be able to look on them. And also, he did not make any prostrated obeisance to the deity. But because he mentioned that he and his wife are like Krishna's father and mother, and so why the father should pay the obeisances to the son. And one night, like Mr. Balu and wife came to Srila Prabhupada and asked them to speak about Rasa Leela of Radha and Krishna. And for that, Prabhupada replied that Rasa Leela is like a most exalted spiritual topic, and it should be it is meant only for the liberated souls, and one should be completely free of material desires. And so only if a person is of that quality, he should be able, like he should be fit to hear Rasa Leela. But as Mr. Balu mentioned that his wife and him are like very much keen to listen, and so he insisted Prabhupada to recite Rasa Leela. But still, Prabhupada was hesitant, and he was saying that only if anyone is completely free of material attachments to wife, family, home, money, should become fit to hear Krishna's Rasa dance. And but Mr. Balu was keep on insisting that like he was requesting and forcing Swamiji to mention about, to recite about Rasa Leela. And for this, Prabhupada mentioned that like they may be interested, but Prabhupada mentioned that he is not qualified to speak about it. So he asked them to ask someone else.
Can you believe how Prabhupada was careful on this subject? And we don't. He's the host, and someone else, Paul, okay, he's insisting, I can tell. And it's interesting. These people, that's the problem. We have some attachment to it, but sahaja means we imitate like we are great devotees. We won't bow down. One thing is they're saying we are his parents, right? We are his parents, but they want to listen the Rasa Leela dance, Rasa Leela pastime also. If you're parental, then you would like to have the parental pastimes, right? You feel like. Anyway, just I'm thinking. So Prabhupada very staunch on this and very strict about it. They avoid it. So you can ask somebody else who can speak to you. Okay. Now we will move to Prasant Mataji, please.
Prabhupada met privately with various important citizens of Madras. If the leaders of society become Krishna conscious, he would explain that then they, by their example, would create Krishna consciousness in the general populace. Never compromising, never faltering his important visitors, he tried to impart Krishna consciousness to whomever he met. He met with the governor of Madras, K.K. Shah, the staunch Mayavadi and follower of Sankaracharya. Patiently, Prabhupada tried to teach him Krishna consciousness, but the governor would interrupt with his own philosophy. When Prabhupada asked him to somehow help the Krishna conscious movement, the man replied that as governor, there is nothing he could do, since everything was in the hands of the chief minister. Residing in Madras was an elderly scholar and former leading politician who had written several books and translations of Vedic philosophy from the impersonalist point of view. Prabhupada visited him, but the man was paralyzed and could only sit trembling without speaking. Prabhupada spoke for some time about personalism in the Gita. The old scholar sometimes responded with a glimmer in his eye, but he could only make incoherent sounds. Previously, Prabhupada had criticized this man's translation of Gita, which declares that although Krishna says surrender unto him, he did not actually have to surrender unto the person Krishna, but to the impersonal, eternal principle within Krishna. The meeting seemed to have a strong effect on Srila Prabhupada, and for days afterwards, he would sometimes soberly mention how the old Mayavadi scholar was living almost like a vegetable. Srila Prabhupada also met with V. Raj Gopalacharya Rajaji, who had been India's first chief executive after independence. A friend of Mahatma Gandhi, Rajaji was high in public sentiment as a religious politician. Although in his 90s, he was alert and very sympathetic to Prabhupada's movement. Rajaji expressed only one doubt. Prabhupada had created such a huge institution that now his disciples might identify with the institution rather than with Krishna. If that were to happen, then by identifying with the institution, they would again fall into the same type of materialism or false identification as before. Prabhupada replied that because Krishna is absolute, Krishna and Krishna's institution are non-different. To identify with Krishna's institution was to identify with Krishna directly. Rajaji was satisfied by Prabhupada's answer, and after a pleasant conversation, the two friends departed. Prabhupada met various citizens in Madras, various important people in Madras, and he was trying to impart Krishna consciousness to whomever he met. He met Governor K.K. Shah, who is a staunch Mayavadi and follower of Sankaracharya. So he constantly, when Prabhupada is trying to teach him Krishna consciousness, he constantly interrupted him and was trying to talk about his own philosophy. But Prabhupada asked him to help with the Krishna conscious movement. He was very reluctant. He was not very cooperative. And then Prabhupada met an elderly scholar who has written many books from the impersonalist point of view. He was paralyzed and unable to talk. Prabhupada tried to have a conversation with him, but since he was unable to talk, the conversation ended. But it left a strong effect on Srila Prabhupada. And he mentioned sometimes how the scholar was living like a vegetable. And he also met Rajaji. He was a friend of Mahatma Gandhi, and he was a religious politician. He was very sympathetic towards Prabhupada's movement, and he only asked one question: because there are so many institutions and people are working for them, they will again fall into the materialism. But Prabhupada says Krishna and Krishna's institution are non-different. So working for Krishna's institution is also working directly for Krishna. Rajaji was satisfied with this answer, and the two departed.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Speaker?
Prabhupada received an invitation to Chief Justice Veeraswamy's home. The two became friends, and the Chief Justice requested to join the Krishna consciousness movement as soon as possible. He liked Prabhupada's followers, especially 3-year-old Saraswati, and gave her a 6-inch silver murti of Krishna playing the flute. Another evening, Mr. Veeraswamy came to see Prabhupada, and Prabhupada mentioned that he thought Saraswati too young to have such a valuable silver murti, and that he had taken it from her and was going to give her another one. But while they were talking, Saraswati burst into room and ran to her mother, crying, "Krishna is gone." Srila Prabhupada then called her forward and asked, "Saraswati, where is Krishna?" In anxiety, Saraswati replied, "I don't know, someone took him." Prabhupada repeated, "But where is Krishna?" Saraswati replied, "I don't know." "Is he under the cushion?" Prabhupada suggested. And Saraswati ran over to the cushion Prabhupada pointed to. She picked it up, but Krishna was not there. "Is he on the shelf?" Prabhupada asked. Saraswati ran to the shelf. Her eyes darted in all directions. "Where is Krishna?" Saraswati began appealing to the faces of the devotees, glancing at her hands, looking behind their backs, searching everywhere. Prabhupada, intently watching Saraswati, began reciting a verse about the six Goswamis. "He Radhe Vraj Devake Cha Lalite He Nanda Sunokta." This is the mood of Goswamis, he said. They never said, "Now I have seen God, now I am satisfied." No, rather they were saying, "Where is Radha? Where is Krishna? Where are you all now? Are you on Govardhan, or are you under the trees on the banks of Yamuna? Where are you?" In this way, they express their moods of Krishna consciousness. Saraswati anxiety had become heightened to the point of tears. One of the devotees then hinted, "Saraswati, where is Krishna? Who has Krishna?" Saraswati's eyes widened. She exclaimed, "Prabhupada has Krishna." And she rushed up to Prabhupada, convinced that he was holding Krishna. And Prabhupada reached behind his seat and pulled out a small Krishna murti similar to the silver Krishna he had taken from her. "Here is Krishna, Saraswati," Prabhupada said. Saraswati was in ecstasy. All the devotees were struck by Prabhupada's exchange of devotional feelings with even a small child. By his expertise, he had created within her a mood of separation from Krishna. Prabhupada continued explaining to the Chief Justice about the mood of separation from Krishna. So once Srila Prabhupada received an invitation from the Chief Justice, Mr. Veeraswamy, and then both become very good friends. And then also the Chief Justice requested to join the Krishna consciousness movement as soon as possible. So and Mr. Veeraswamy, he liked all of Srila Prabhupada's disciple, and especially he was like very much attracted to the 3-year-old Saraswati. And then he gave her a 6-inch silver murti of Krishna playing the flute. So another evening when Veeraswamy came to see Srila Prabhupada mentioned that Saraswati is too young to have such a valuable silver murti, and that he had taken it from her and was about to give her another one. But while he was talking with the Chief Justice, Saraswati, she burst into the room and then she ran to her mother and crying, "Krishna is gone." And then Srila Prabhupada called her forward and asked, "Where is Krishna?" And then in anxiety, he said, "I don't know, somebody took him." And then, but again, Srila Prabhupada said, "Is he under the cushion? Is he on the shelf? Where is Krishna?" And then, and then again, Saraswati, she was like, "I don't know." And then, "Where is Krishna?" And then she looked at all the devotees. She was looking at her hands and then looking behind the devotees. And then, while she was doing that, Srila Prabhupada was like watching that little girl Saraswati. And then he began to recite a verse from a verse about the 6 Goswamis. And then he mentioned that is the mood of Goswamis. They never say that now I found God, I'm satisfied. But rather they are always saying, "Where is Radha? Where is Krishna?" They are always anxious. And then so that way the Goswamis, and they always express their moods of Krishna consciousness. So and then little Saraswati's anxiety, it was heightened to the point of tears. And then one devotee reminded her, "Where is Krishna? Saraswati, where is Krishna? Who has Krishna?" And then her eyes widened and she explained, "Prabhupada has Krishna." And then she rushed to Srila Prabhupada. And then Srila Prabhupada, he reached behind his seat and pulled a small murti of Krishna and then gave it to her, saying, "Here is Krishna." And then as soon as she received that small murti of Krishna from Srila Prabhupada, she was in ecstasy. And then all devotees seeing this little exchange, I mean, they were like they were struck by wonder, seeing how Srila Prabhupada was able to create that devotional feeling of separation even within a small child. And then Srila Prabhupada continued explaining to the Chief Justice about the mood of separation from Krishna. It's only me, Prabhu, today.
Oh, Only you. Thank you. So, for centuries, certain religious and social controversies had divided Madras. Saivites and Vaishnavis. There's a difference actually for centuries. Followers worshippers of Lord Shiva and worshippers of Lord Vishnu. And Prabhupada often addressed these issues. One conflict was between the Brahmanas and the non-Brahmanas. Because those born in Brahmana family had traditionally monopolized the important governmental, social and religious posts. And the non-Brahmanas had developed a powerful political opposition, passing laws banning such things as religious pictures. In their mundane political conception of the sacred Ramayana, they had even committed offenses to the deities of Lord Rama. In talking with his disciples, Srila Prabhupada said the Chief Justice is Brahmana. I don't think so. The Chief Justice Brahmana? I don't think so. He may be a Kshatriya, but you can tell him that we can solve the whole problem between the Brahmanas and non-Brahmanas. We will give facility that anyone can become a Brahmana. He simply has to follow our principles and we will make him a Brahmana. Prabhupada said the Shastra states that in Kali Yuga, the demons will take birth as a Brahmana. Thus, this deep controversy. The so-called Brahmanas, the leaders, were not satisfying the people. Prabhupada said that anyone who followed the 4 regulatory principles, chanted Hare Krishna and took Vaishnava initiation would become a Brahmana. And that would solve the whole problem. There'll be more controversy and they will freak out. Just like caste Brahmins, the same problem they will create, I'm sure. They should begin, Prabhupada said, by making Chief Justice Veeraswamy a Brahmana. Mr. Veeraswamy admitted that he was already eager to take initiation from Srila Prabhupada. His only difficulty was giving up tea drinking. When Prabhupada heard this, he said that even if the justice did drink a little tea, he could accept him. He would accept him as an exceptional case. Some of the Madras caste-conscious Brahmanas criticized. See, it came. Srila Prabhupada is creating Brahmanas from low-born Westerners. During a gathering at the home of a Madrasi Brahmin, one of the guests commented to Prabhupada, Swamiji, your disciples don't pronounce the Sanskrit very nicely. Even the Hare Krishna mantra, they sometimes do not say correctly. Yes, Prabhupada replied, that is why we have come here, to get your association so you can teach us. That's a powerful response. So here, okay, for centuries, this issue, we have it in Tamil Nadu, that the difference, 2 things, one is differences of Vaishnavas and Saivites, they don't have a proper understanding. And also here, not only that, Brahmanas and non-Brahmanas. They're staunch Brahmanas, but looks like, they have also, they didn't take off the society well and monopolize the important governmental, social, religious posts. And then to oppose that, non-Brahmanas formed a political opposition. And they caused damage to religious pictures. They become more aggressive, they become opposition to that. So eventually, I think, Christianity, Muslims also growing there. In talking, so he was telling, Prabhupada was telling to disciple that that Chief Justice is not a Brahmin, and we can make him. We can solve all the problems. That anyone who chants Hare Krishna, follows 4 regulatory principles, and then we will make him a Brahmana. That will be the best. So Chief Justice Veeraswamy was interested. He said, I'm taking a little tree. So Prabhupada said, he knows that it will go away eventually. It's not a big deal. So I'll make a little compromise. That's okay, not a problem. I'll make you a Brahmin initiation. So then these things comes that some of the Madras, those Orthodox Brahmanas, they look into only the rules and regulations. As Rupa Goswami says that simply following the rules and regulations and without considering love of Krishna is no value, for the sake of following the rules and regulations. So here he's saying, oh, your disciples, Western disciples, they don't even chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra very properly, pronounce properly. So Prabhupada looks like sarcastically said, yes, That's why we have come here, to get your assistance so you can teach us. Okay. AJ, you want to read?
Srila Prabhupada encountered another long-standing South Indian feud between the Shivites, followers of Lord Shiva, and the Vaishnavas, followers of Lord Vishnu. The Shivites generally espoused an impersonalistic philosophy, declaring God to be the impersonal one appearing in many forms, such as Shiva and Krishna. But since all the forms were one, ultimately, fighting as to which God was the best was petty and childish. Excuse me. Prabhupada's disciples found this philosophy difficult to deal with, and when Giriraja, how do you say that? Is that how you say it, Giriraja?
You say Giriraj. Giriraja.
Okay, Giriraja had argued with a wealthy Shivite, Mr. Ramakrishna. They had separated with hurt feelings. But in the meetings with other persons in Madras, Giriraj was often reminded, "Have you met Mr. Ramakrishna? He is a very good man and a leader in religious functions." Giriraj became embarrassed and decided to make another attempt to win Mr. Ramakrishna's friendship. They talked again, but remained unsatisfied. Giriraj then informed Prabhupada and asked if he would meet with Mr. Ramakrishna himself. Prabhupada agreed. When they met, Mr. Ramakrishna began by saying, "Swamiji, we have been having some discussion about devotion to Lord Krishna and devotion to Lord Shiva. What do you say? Who is greater, Krishna or Shiva?" I have a feeling I know what he's going to say. Prabhupada replied that the word bhakti, or devotion, could not properly be applied to the worship of Lord Shiva. Bhakti, he said, meant service without any material desire, whereas puja included service with the desire for some return. Bhakti, therefore, could only be applied to Krishna. "But isn't it possible," asked Mr. Ramakrishna, "for someone to be a bhakta of Lord Shiva and to worship Lord Shiva simply out of devotion without desiring any material benefit?" "It may be possible," Prabhupada said, "but generally not. Just like when a person enters a liquor shop, generally it's taken that he is going for drinking, although there may be some exception." Prabhupada gave example of the gopis' worship of the goddess Katyayani. Their worship had not been for material benefit, but for devotion to Krishna. Similarly, if one worshipped Lord Shiva with the aim of serving Lord Krishna, that would be bhakti. But people generally approach Shiva for material benefit. Although Mr. Ramakrishna was usually prone to argue these points, Prabhupada's answer satisfied him. So, Giriraj, so I guess it's in South India, there's this debate, long-standing debate between Shivites and Vaishnavas, right? People who worship Shiva and people that worship Vishnu. And, it sounds like even at its core, right? Shivites generally view it as an impersonalistic philosophy, and it takes many forms, including Krishna. But since they were all ultimately the same, it didn't matter. The fighting was silly. So Prabhupada disciples, they had trouble figuring out how to approach this. And when Giriraj went and talked to Mr. Ramakrishna, he felt, it sounds like they had some words and things got a little tense. And when they left, there were some hurt feelings, he said. But then as he traveled around the city, everybody's like, "Hey, you got to talk to Mr. Ramakrishna. He's a very good guy. He's very, very smart, and he's a leader in our religious community." So Giriraj tries to go back and talk to Ramakrishna again, and again, same problem. Right? They run into the same issue. So Giriraj says, "Prabhupada, can you please speak with this man? Maybe you can help settle this, or come away better than I did." So they Prabhupada agrees, and they meet, and he says, "Hey, which one's better, right? Who's greater, Krishna or Shiva?" And Prabhupada tells him, well, in bhakti, it's selfless devotion. There's nothing to be gained. And, so where typically people who are approaching Lord Shiva are approaching Lord Shiva for some sort of material benefit or some sort of gain. But then, so he's saying, hey, for it to be bhakti, it can only apply to Krishna, and that's the greatest path. And Mr. Ramakrishna says, well, what if someone was a bhakta towards Lord Shiva and they, worship Shiva without any desire for material benefit and only devotion. And Prabhupada gives the analogy of like, well, it's possible, but probably not, right? If someone goes into a liquor store, the reason they're going in there is because they want to drink. They're not going in there just for fun, right? So he said there may be some exceptions, but ultimately, it's if you're worshiping Shiva, it's because you have some material desire. But then he does talk about the gopis who did worship Katyayani, but their worship was not for their own benefit, right? It was as a way to get closer to Krishna, to show their devotion for Krishna. So he's saying, all right, if you are able to worship Shiva, but the goal ultimately is to worship Krishna, then that's bhakti, and that's okay. But most people, he said, most people don't do that. Most people are looking for the material benefit. And Mr. Ramakrishna, seemed to be satisfied with Prabhupada's answer there.
And you did a great job in summarizing this.
Thank you.
This is the complicated stuff, and I'm glad you covered nice. Maybe one. How about we have a quick reflections? We have a few minutes. So why don't we have a reflections today? What we read. Everyone, please contribute something.
Prabhu, I wanted to ask, where there was a line about dowry system in Africa and in India. So is it somewhere mentioned in our Vedic culture about the dowry system in elaboration?
Yeah, a lot of places. It is the custom and all over. Krishna and Devaki got married, right? How come? So you read the Krishna book the other day. Did you read how many 200 maid servants? How many 1500? 1500 elephants? Yeah. And horses, chariots, and all golden chariots. Yeah, Vasudev is helping us actually. Yeah. So it is a custom because when this is not a material thing. It is see the daughter is given as a charity. It's called dana. The modern society may not, and see whole things fails when we don't have a proper understanding of the shastras. We people just complain because we give up the study, the instructions of the shastras. So it's a very big thing. Father and father protects the child, daughter, and then father gives the daughter to husband to take care, and not for the husband to abuse. It's husband's responsibility also to take care of nicely and protect from difficulties and everything. Then husband gives the wife under the protection of the son. And since time immemorial, this system is there, to satisfy and to please. That is there. And more details, I'm sure Manu Samhita will have this thing. But throughout everywhere throughout the book, we will find when in the dowry system is before itself is there. It's Kanyadan. I'm not very expert to speak, but it is bona fide. But it is not bona fide doing a business by that. A boy says, "Oh, I must get this. I'm doing this because of eventually turned out to be in business and creating chaos." At the same time, the girls also, they come for the sake of not in a mode of serving attitude. It's a big relationship, and it's big responsibility entering into the ashram. It is a spiritual values also there, a lot of things. It's not whimsical, but nowadays people made it business. Okay, I will get married, I'll get this much money. If you don't give this, I'll not marry. But it was there, but at this time in the age of Kali, now that will also go away because boy and girl not recommended anymore. It's Vedic system, it is there. And a father who knows, in fact, girls' father don't even drink water. Many people strict, we will not drink water of my daughter's place. So they still follow the strict guidelines and everything. It just balances the society. It keeps the family in harmony. So the father does not create any disturbance in other daughter's life. So there's a proper etiquette is there. But in Kali Yuga, everything is collapsed. There's hardly you will find it. But in the Vedic system, it is there. Who else can tell any other example of the marriages? I'm sure Arjuna's marriage was there with Subhadra. They got dowry, and you know, Krishna. Everybody, everywhere gets it. But in Africa, they are not the followers of the Vedas, though. They're just whimsical system. I don't know what is that, but they're just doing whimsically. So, okay. Any other thing? It's 44. We have 1 more minute. Is it Nipa? Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhu, I got the idea that there are some spiritual beliefs mentioned about it, which has to be read thoroughly to understood. But yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes you feel doubt, like if the father is not that rich, and it, like you said, sometimes it's become a business nowadays. That really is painful.
Most of the things in business nowadays. It's not a relationship, not a responsibility, it's a business. You can see how marriages takes place. You know, even they don't know word. There's not enough time. We can speak a lot and lot day and night on this. This is the very bad part of it. So nowadays, no. At this time, no. But those still have following, would like to follow. They can always follow the proper way of doing. At the same time, one should not be materially influenced by these things. Okay, thank you so much. We will continue tomorrow. Maybe we can discuss something more tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thanks to Vasudev who set up today for the call.